Let's now go over two examples of error handling. So one involves a call chain of size 2, method calls, and the other one involves a call chain of size 3, 3 method calls. Let's see the first one. So we are talking about a circle class, very simple one. We simply got an attribute of type double, radius, and simply got the for constructor initializing the attribute value to be 0. And again, let's not worry about declaring public for the class and also private for the attribute. You can do that in the code example yourself. And we got one mutator here, set radius, and set the r to be whatever, set the radius to be whatever the input r should be, right? So that's the what the mutator should do. However, we want to make sure r, the input, if it is strictly less than 0, in that case, it should be considered as invalid. Let's say if the r is actually equal to 0, we can still calculate maybe the area of the circle, which would be just 0. That's okay. But if you give a radius of -1 or -2 and etc., it will be considered as invalid, right? And for now, with the way we handle the error is by simply printing out to the console. It's called the standard output. Okay, so we say invalid radius to the console. Okay, and then otherwise we're gonna if the r is strictly if r is larger than or equal to 0, the negation of this. In that case, radius should be assigned to r. Right. So that's the logic for this method here. Pretty simple. And then for the get area accessor method, we just return radius squared times the pi. And here is some observation over here. A negative radius is considered as an invalid input value to the method set radius, of course. So this is a precise condition over here under which we will print out the error to the console. Otherwise, we'll set the radius accordingly to the input. That's what we'll do. And this is a question. What if the caller of the circle.setRadius, so you can see I'm now trying to use what we learned before. So who will be the caller of circle.setRadius? So circle.setRadius is talking about this method here. So when we say a caller, we are basically talking about maybe another class which actually initiates an object of type circle and try to invoke a method upon that particular objects by calling a setRadius, basically. Okay, so what if the caller of circle.setRadius passes a negative value of for r? So now can you imagine what's going to happen? Okay, let me tell you what the answer is, and then I'll illustrate that to you. Okay, so this will illustrate what a problem is, and also the limitation, what the limitation is for using console messages for error handling. So an error message we printed to the console, apparently, because line number 5, that's exactly how line number 5 is defined over here. Okay, to warn the caller about say radius, to say, oh, you shouldn't really pass some negative value. However, what's the problem? The problem really is when some error really occurs, the only thing that we can do from the callee, which is set radius, is simply to print out some error to the console. But that error, that console output has no obligation imposed upon the caller to do anything to handle the error. So that's a problem. Okay. However, printing an error message to the console does not force the caller of setRadius to stop and handle invalid values of r. So let me illustrate that to you. So, but the principle is really important to actually go through before I actually visualize what's happening here. Okay, let's now go over to the iPad. Let's now see for this simple case. Okay, and I will also remember to give you some example again for call stack. Okay, let's say this is the caller for the set radius. Okay, so this is the caller. So we got circle calculator, and we got the main method. So you can think about the combination of this and this. So this is the caller. Okay, so this is the caller over here, and let's say we create some circle objects over here. So this is the type of the object variable, and also we are trying to invoke set radius. So now you can see this combination over here, circle and also set radius. This is a callee, right? Just a very quick review about what we just learned. So this is a callee, and here's a question. Okay, when we actually pass the input value, let's say -10, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen is minus 10. So we are calling this method over here, right? So when we're calling it, r will be replaced by the argument's value minus 10, and every occurrence of r will be replaced by minus 10, and also minus 10 over here. So far so good. And what's the context object? Context object should be c. So that means here we might say there's implicit this here. So we'll say c dot radius is assigned to minus 10, right? That's what we have. Let's now try to trace it. Apparently minus 10 less than 0 is actually going to evaluate to true. That means we're going to execute this line over here to output invalid radius to the console, right? So if you imagine there's a console, and this is the output that will be output to the console. Output to console. Here's the question. Given that an error already occurred, because it's already printed to the console, are we still going to calculate the area? Well, we shouldn't, because minus 10 is some invalid output as indicated by the console output that should not be used as a radius to calculate the circle of to calculate the area of a circle. We shouldn't do that. However, what's going to happen is that the execution flow will still continue, which means we're going to say double area is going to be assigned to c dot get area, and c dot get area is going to be, well, since we didn't really execute the else part, right? It's bypassed because the if conditional part is actually satisfied. So the radius remains to be the default 0. So when we calculate the area over here, it's going to be area, and then it's going to be 0.0, which does not make any sense. What's happening? Let me recap. What's happening here is when we give minus 10 over here. Let me just also put a console over here so you can see exactly what's going on. Let's imagine that this is the console. Okay, so this is the console. What's going to happen is when we pass minus 10, first of all, it's going to print out this error message. So it would say invalid radius. However, it will still actually go on to execute these two lines as well, which will calculate the area, and then it would say area 0.0. This is absolutely nonsensical, because given that there's an error, why did you still go ahead to actually calculate the area, and the area 0.0 is simply wrong? Okay, so it seems like using system and out print line is actually not the way to go, right? And the main issue really is, let me just revisit the paragraph over here. Printing an error message to the console does not force the caller of the set radius to stop and handle invalid values of r. So what I meant was over here, so now hopefully you can now appreciate a little bit more. At this point, after we actually after passing minus 10 for calculation, okay, so here printing an error message to console does not cause, and the caller of course is circle calculator main, cause caller to stop. It does not, because it still continues to execute these two lines. All right, let me show you very quickly on the Eclipse as well. It's really important to see that. You will see under this package, exceptions, circle and bank. So this is something made available to you. You can give a try. And I want to go to this particular package, circles without exceptions. Without exception meaning that we are using console messages to do the error handling. Okay. So what I will do is I'm gonna click on circle calculator, and then the error message, lines are not exactly the same as what I showed in the iPad, but they are a similar idea. Okay, so what I will do is I'm going to set a breakpoint over here, and also what I'm doing now is giving even more some even more interesting console application. We're gonna read the radius from the user by using next double, right? That's something we saw in the review tutorial series, how you do that. Let me launch the debugger over here, which is gonna launch circle calculator. Okay, so you don't need to worry about this line over here. Okay, just enter a radius. Okay, that's really from this prompt over here. Okay, if I say, for example, -10, and then I will switch to the debug perspective. Okay, I'm now here, right? So I want you to notice the following. I could have, of course, just step into the set radius. I could. Let me just do that. If I step into set radius, and now R is actually -10. That's the input, right? That one is going to satisfy the if condition over here. So I can say step over. You can see the console, we see error, invalid radius -10. That's the error message. So far, it's actually okay. However, what's happening here, what we really expect to happen when an error occurs is to say the execution flow now should be interrupted rather than going to continue as if there was no problem. Okay, and if I say step over, so now we are actually after executing c.setRadius, but we actually haven't stopped. You see the caller of this problematic method call over here has not stopped. So we are still executing these two lines over here. So that's the problem. So if you do that and do that, we'll still say circle with radius -10 has area 0.0. It does not make any sense, of course. So that's why using error messages through the console is not the way to go. Okay, this is one simple example I want to show you. And I want to show you another example, which is about the bank. Let's now go over the bank example. But if you go through the slides, you will see exactly what I just said. Okay, you can just go over the slides yourself, the points. Okay, let's now go over the second example of bank. Actually, before that, I would like to do something that I promised you that I would do. Let me go back to iPad. About the call stack over here. But that one is very easy to summarize. This is the starting point of execution for the main method. So this should be first become active and push to the stack over here, right? So that'll be the circle calculator and the main method. I would say circle calculator dot main. So this is the very first caller that we have. And then inside this method here, we actually call set radius from the circle class. As soon as we make this method call, we know that the rest over here is going to be suspended until we actually finish the method call over here. That's something we discussed earlier. So what's going to happen is we're going to have the callee, which will be c.setRadius, and c is of type circle. So we got circle dot set radius. And then, so that's going to be set radius. As soon as this is actually completed and print out the error message, we're going to remove this from the stack and then resume back to over here for the rest of the caller code. In that case, we're going to execute these two lines and then print out also area will be 0.0, and then we're going to remove this as well from the stack. But we know that it's not really something we would expect. But I'm going to address that what should be the proper solution using exceptions later.